So hello, everyone. Happy Thursday. Thank you so much for joining our C.A.L webinar series. We have a very special guest today, and this is called So Long Silos, Using Internal Communications to Create Collaboration. I'll be on hand to answer any questions and help facilitate, but Megan, take it away.
All right. Well, first I want to say thank you to C.A.L for having me today. My name is Meghan Kowalski. I am the Outreach and Reference Librarian within the Learning Resources Division, which is co-located with C.A.L over in Building 4250 on the Van Ness campus. I originally gave this presentation at the 2022 Computers and Libraries Conference, which was online a few months ago. I've de-libraried it and adapted it for UDC. As we are a smaller group today, please feel free to ask questions or interject at any point. I will keep an eye on the chat. David's going to keep an eye on the chat for me as well. But if I miss anything, feel free to unmute yourselves. I have also added time for questions and discussion at the end. And if anything here intrigues you today, I am very happy to follow up with you one-on-one after this session is over. So just looking at communications broadly is how I want to get started. And first, there are external communications. And this is what the public sees and engages with. This is your typical marketing and outreach work, and it is often strategically planned. So I don't know if you've noticed in your inbox, the university just sent out one of its UDC Forward newsletters. That's an example of external communication. Internal communication, on the other hand, serves staff and administration and is organizationally facing. It's where information and ideas are exchanged. And when it comes to communication, you need both. Most organizations spend the bulk of their time, their strategic planning, and their money on external communications. And that's great, but we don't want to forget to spend time on internal communication. Internal communication is where the work gets done. External communication is the visible product of that work. So the goals of communication are fourfold. First, you are a team. You want to use communication to show the whole of a department or the organization working together to serve a specific population. And what that looks like is going to depend on, are you looking, say, at the library or the physics department? Are you looking overall something like causes or Cs, or even bigger, the university as a whole? And behind the scenes employees are just as important as the public facing staff. The team is a through line. What happens in one area necessarily impacts another and what the public sees and interacts with. Another goal is increased engagement. Better engaged employees are happier and more productive. You want to develop more robust connections to both the work and the organization's overall missions. And also you want to see and understand where a specific individual's role fits within the grand scheme of things. Internal communications also help extend your input. You want to get input from all areas, not just the traditional roles that tend to provide feedback. And this is where we say so long, goodbye to those silos. And academia is full of them, and they are as problematic as any other bureaucratic red tape. Traditional silos stymie communication, collaboration, and innovation. And when you break down silos, you're giving people a say in the business decisions of an organization, and that makes them feel more connected to the work. You never know who has hidden experience and expertise. And those light bulb moments don't always come from traditional siloed work. You need new eyes to see a new vision for your organization. And better communication empowers employees to become brand advocates. The more they know, the better they can share and help. The more they know, the better they can see how their work helps. And the more they know, the more of the story of the organization they can share. And there are great benefits to improving your internal communication. First is creating a current and comprehensive knowledge base of understanding. Information is no longer stuck in a certain department. You can, build in duplication, which means institutional knowledge isn't lost when one person leaves. Internal communication forces you to write things down and keep it updated. Plus, you can provide shared updates. This means information is dispersed to all areas, and new information no longer causes surprises, which makes work easier. You also hear all the other voices that might otherwise be omitted. You never know where good ideas will come from. This gives a chance for people to add their insights on something. And there are always going to be hidden experts on your team, and their input can be valuable. Plus, you can find unintended consequences. When work in one area changes, it may impact another, and this means people can plan. Question in the chat, what are some ways we can measure or assess effective communication? I will get to that, but one of the best ways to measure communication is simply, does everyone know what is going on? If you were to have a meeting right now and say something is happening, does everyone on your team know that? That's a big one, just simply asking, do you know what's happening? But I will get a little bit more to that later on. So again, going back to the unintended consequences, you can stop minor problems before they become major problems. You can fix stuff or workflows before it becomes office politics of people thinking, I need to do this so it happens and no one takes it away from me and things like that. And again, this gets back to the idea that organizational work is a through line. Something in one department doesn't stay in one department. It is always going to have a broader impact. So there are 4 basic types of administrative or internal communication I want to mention today. The first is administrative. This is just your basic updates. Staff changes, building changes, schedule changes, things like that. New stuff. You want to let people know when you get or do new things. This can be as big as new grant funding or something as small as a new K-Cup machine in the staff kitchen. It can also be where you share policies and procedures. Internal communication can also be used for team building, and this is where you can solicit input and feedback and get review from folks. It is also where you can ask employees or team members to complete surveys. And you can also share things like, what did you learn or like? You're asking for input and sharing information. Internal communication also includes the water cooler stuff. This is just fun things, life updates, recommendations. Do we have a favorite local restaurant we want to mention to people down the street? By the way, the new Shamali's Market just down the street from the Van Ness campus is fantastic. It's also where you can do kudos and bragging, both professional and personal. If someone had a baby or ran a marathon and wants to share that, let them. This gets to the team building aspect of internal communications. And it also shows that you care about people and not just the work. People are individuals and not just their productive output. So what can you do when it comes to internal communications? And I have quite a few ideas. By no means is this an exhaustive list, but it does hit on the biggies. And by no means do you need to employ all of these in your department or area at the university. So the first one, and the one we all do, is meetings. And why do we have meetings? Well, it connects people to people, and some items are just better explained verbally or in a group. But there are different types of meetings. There's those general all-staff meetings. There's also one-to-one meetings where you are directly meeting with other people on your team. You can also have smaller group meetings that either focus on a team or a cross-functional group, or again, that through line of work, showing the workflow from beginning to end. You can also have professional development meetings where you teach a new skill to whoever is interested. The big one through the pandemic, of course, is email. Why do we want to use email? Well, first, links. You can share more information. Plus, email has the added benefit of creating a searchable reference database. If people save their emails or archive them, the great thing about Outlook or Google or any other email platform is that it has a search function. And there are different kinds of emails. There are mass newsletters. And what's great about these, you don't always just send them an email. You can print them out and stick them on the office fridge or other central location. Maybe a newsletter is what got you to attend today's session. You can create team newsletters. This is where you just send information out to one specific group. Or again, those one-to-one emails we are all used to at every office or in every community environment. Next, we have intranets or message boards, and you need these because they act as a central place for people to access information whenever they need it. This is where you can post manuals, policies and procedures, and other training material. If possible, you want to make this information downloadable and have room for commenting so people can say, hey, I went to read this, but it's outdated and things like that. Or if they have content they want to share with that. You can create contact lists of who does what. And the best thing about intranets and message boards is that you can update them regularly. Related to this, we have online chat. And the reason you need online chat is people need a way to just informally communicate. And depending on your system, this can also create an archive that is searchable. And there are different ways to use online chat. Obviously, there is the professional one where work can be discussed and items can be shared. You can set it up to have all staff on one chat, or you can develop functional team systems. You can also have fun stuff. It's always great to have that water cooler channel because people need to connect with people on a human and personal level. Next, you have video. And the reason you want video is not everyone likes live trainings. People learn differently, and video allows something to be used over and over again. People can slow them down, speed them up, depending on their learning styles. And sometimes when it comes to communication, the slick production values matter for those bigger events. But it's also great for training because it offers self-paced and referral. You can say, hey, go watch this video, come back to me if you have questions and things like that. Finally, walking around. People forget that just getting up and talking to people is a form of internal communication. And there is less pressure when you're just walking around than, saying, hey, come to my office for this formal meeting. And so when it comes to walking around, you can just say, hey, take a lap around the office. Encourage people to get up and go places they don't usually inhabit. You can encourage people to try, see, explore new things. You can't see the big picture of your department if you never leave your desk. And this is getting to the idea of 360 communication. If you are not soliciting feedback from everyone, you're doing it wrong. Hearing from all sides and not just the top down is important. And this is because communication has benefits up and down any sort of organizational ladder. It encourages teamwork and collaboration. It creates a sense of ownership over the work and over the mission of the institution. And the best ideas don't always come from the top or the bottom. They could come laterally. Good ideas come from everywhere. And there's a question in the chat. Do you have any favorite places to meet on campus? Well, that depends. If it's a small group, I say any conference room. I'm not picky. Right now, I encourage people to meet outside simply because of the pandemic. Right now in 4250, we have this wonderful interior courtyard that is relatively shaded depending on the time of day you're there, but it's got pre-set up tables. The tables work in groups of 4, but there's also a few tables right next to one another. Denard Plaza is a great one. Again, outside, big tables. You can have group meetings out there. Plus, something about being outside makes work feel less like work. If you're doing a presentation, something like the Windows Lounge or the UDC Theater is also a great place to go. David has a comment, the courtyard is great, near to the Starbucks. Yes, being near coffee is always a good thing. So when it comes to communications, internal communications, we have some best practices that we want to look at. So first, you want to collect information, create a collection point. Survey or feedback's a spot where you can gather information for newsletters. If you're sending out surveys and you're soliciting feedback, you got to have some place to keep it all, and then you can refer to that from newsletters. You can solicit, via email or chat for content. And so you can collect all of this stuff that you can use immediately or save for later. You can create content calendars or content banks to help set up that stuff. So look at your organizational or department calendar. Look at the UDC academic calendar, the yearly calendar, et cetera, to get content ideas depending on what is going on. You can create a folder or a spot to dump things, again, creating that collection point that you can use at a later date. And when it comes to sharing information, you want to ask first. Before you share personal information, make sure that person wants to be shared. Not everyone is comfortable sharing their personal life. Next, when it comes to sharing, share wins and losses. Always, always, always share the wins because good news is always warranted, but share the losses or why things did not work. You might get a better idea of how to fix it to try again. It also helps to show that mistakes happen and are acceptable and that we can recover from them. This helps remove the fear of failure, which can lead to more people trying new things, and that can be great. And you always want to err on the side of more people getting the bigger picture. Unless there is a legal or privacy reason not to, share, share, share. I don't know what it is about academia, but we tend to think you don't need to know that. You don't need to know that. And that's not the case. It is always better to share more information. It never hurts to have more people see the big picture and have the opportunity to provide feedback. You also want to have multiple formats and channels. And these are channels of communication. different people communicate differently. Chat services can be overwhelming and distracting, but people can also find out important stuff on that. So you want to have a balance and a mix of internal communications methods so that everyone's getting the message in a way that works best for them. You want to monitor all of your internal communications, but not for participation. What you want to look for is what is happening. What questions are people asking? That can let you know, oh, there's an information gap here, or I didn't think about that, things like that. You can look at what gaps in knowledge exist. If you're discovering errors are happening over and over and over again, monitoring communications can help you identify that. What feedback are you getting? Is the response to your internal communications negative, positive? Why? You want to look for trends and insights. But when it comes to doing internal communications, you want to set limits. You don't want to spam folks. We all get way more email than we can possibly handle. You also want to set the expectation that you're not expecting a response after regular office hours or on weekends or vacations. I always recommend people have a no communication day. And this is one day a week where there is no expectation to respond to email. People are constantly monitoring their inbox, so they think they have to respond right away. And if you have a day where you say, yes, messages can be sent, but there is no expectation to respond, that sets aside one day of a week for deep work. And in academia, finding time for deep work is difficult. So if you say as a department, we are setting this day aside for deep work, that makes it okay for everyone to ignore their inbox, to ignore their chat, not schedule meetings. And you want to build a culture of trust. Don't spring big decisions out of nowhere. Abrupt change is terrifying. There should always be a lead up to things, and you should always be soliciting feedback through times of change. You also provide opportunities for anonymity. Some people are just not comfortable sharing because they are afraid of ramifications. There's past workplace trauma they're working through, and we want to make it okay for people to provide feedback they think might be upsetting. And so there's a good way to do it. Set up an anonymous suggestion box, particularly if you're a supervisor, so people can share information with you that they might not feel comfortable coming to you with, as an individual. There's a question in the chat. Do you have any tips for making a meeting more engaging? Yes, number one, make it a half hour or less. It's always engaging if it's short, because people think I have a limited amount of time, I need to pay attention. 2, have an agenda. If you go into a meeting without an agenda, people aren't going to know why they're there. You need to disperse that ahead of time so people have time to think about it and come ready with ideas to talk about. And then in the meeting, don't do the sage on the stage thing where you just say, I'm throwing, information at you. Make sure you are building in chances for feedback and constantly asking, okay, what do you think about that? You are going to get the same people talking over and over again, but these things happen. And don't be afraid to throw in a random icebreaker. One of our LRD staff meetings ahead of time, we said, let's do a baby picture game. I asked for baby pictures, I threw them into a PowerPoint, and we all played a game of, hey, who is this person? And that, that broke the ice a little bit. It doesn't have to be long, it doesn't have to be a heavy lift, but you can make it easy. Those are my 4 main tips. But the main one I would have is half hour or less. If the meetings go over a half hour, people tend to want to fill the entire hour or the entire time it is scheduled for. So when it comes to internal communication, the biggest takeaway I have today is just try it. Try a new thing. You can always stop. Many internal communications tools are free or low cost. There is no reason not to try it. If it doesn't work, and you can backtrack. It doesn't hurt anything. A lot of people think once they start something, they can't stop, and that's not the case. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, and that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. So to give you an example of what things look like, this is what we do in LRD, just a few examples of our internal communications and actions. So first things first is we have an internal email newsletter that goes out once a month. And while this is a screenshot, I am going to drop the link into the chat to this specific email newsletter. And this is something I make each month, but before I send it out, I solicit input from others on what needs to be included, and I do not specify what they send to me. It can be a mix of professional, personal, fun. I don't care. If they think it is worth the LRD staff knowing, I would like to hear about it. And it goes out the first working day of each month. The content tends to stay about the same, but we do adapt it depending on what's going on. So we always start with the important bits, and that's what is the most important information. And this is that top, few bullet points that if people only glance at their inbox, this is what I want them to see first. This is where the important information is. Then we have a reminder of the month, and this can be something simply as silly as please don't forget to input your statistics, or remind patrons that they still have to wear a mask when they're in the library. It can also be bigger things like, outside, hey, your taxes are due in 2 weeks, things like that. We also offer the Director's Corner, and this is where the director of the library, Melba Broom, provides content. It's usually just a team building message, but it's great for her to have a chance to talk to the staff directly within this newsletter. We also have a section for what's new, and this is usually a mix of, hey, the library has this new resource, or hey, we're trying a new thing. Here's a new policy and procedure you need to hear about. That's what's there. We also have an event calendar, and this is for not just things going on in the library, but also campus as a whole, DC locally, and every now and then we throw in fun things like, I mentioned Tax Day, but also Star Wars Day. We had, I mentioned that. And then we also include statistics from the past month related to what's been happening at the library. Because it's always fun to see, this is how many people are using the library. This is how many books were checked out and things like that. Next, we have an intranet, and we use LibApps. It's a library-specific platform that most of library work is done on, but this acts as our centralized knowledge base. The university is on the Microsoft platform, and there is the ability to build an intranet-like system there, so you can look into that. On our intranet, as you can see, we have a calendar. Because it's the summer, it is very empty, but this is where things do populate. We also have frequently asked questions, and these are internal. What questions are staff asking? We also have our shared files, so people have one centralized knowledge base, and those files are downloadable. We also have links to various important things and system status updates. When a certain database goes down, this is where we can find out about that. Next, we have our internal chat system. And again, this is based on LibApps chat, but there is also something similar in Microsoft Teams. This is super helpful for hybrid work. I think there is only one day out of the week every single reference librarian is on campus at the same time. It's also where we at the library chat with our online users. This is where our patrons can also chat. It is helpful in the system that we can see folks who are online and active. We can set, away messages. We can say we're out. So if I were to show you my screen right now, you would see a big red circle because I am, not listed as online right now because I'm in this presentation. So this is a good way when we know, oh, someone popped off for a second. I better monitor to see if any student chats are coming in. And our system also makes an online archive, which is extremely helpful when folks are out of office. Like last week, I took a few days off, and I could go back and see what was happening in the chat just by clicking back. So when it comes to doing internal communications, these are a few platforms that are the most common at UDC. It's by no means an exhaustive list of internal communications platform. For us at the library, we use LibApps, but there's also a platform thing called Trello. This is a great online service where you can project manage and do to-do lists and things that you can share with folks. Basecamp is a project planning and again, a project management platform. There's also Microsoft Teams, and that's got a whole lot of functionality, probably more than anyone needs, but it is there. Blackboard, obviously. Blackboard, there are various ways you can use that for internal communications. And MailChimp is the one we use at the library. It's the university. It's an email messaging platform system. There are many, many, many email systems out there, but MailChimp is the most popular, and it is one the university has a main account for. In the library, I have created our own account. So if you are on campus, you can create a free account if you want to send out those fun-looking email newsletters like I do. I do have a few resources here. I know I said I de-libraried this presentation, but I left the ones that were library related simply because the lessons within those hold, but there's also some general marketing here. I will provide David with the slides and he can send these slides out after the event. I do want to get to Q&A, but I also just want to pop in here. Please feel free to contact me at any time. That is my personal website, but that is also my work email, and feel free to follow me on Twitter and Instagram. I also need to do a shout out to Slides Go, who provided the template for these slides. It is a wonderful platform for formatting great slides. So now I'll get back to the Q&A. And since we are a small group, let's make this a discussion. I am happy to hear from anyone. Okay, question in the chat. What is a communication strategy or tool that you adopted over the pandemic that you continue to use? Well, the library was actually using a lot of these, but how we used them changed differently. The main one being chat. Chat became online chat became our main way of communicating on a day-to-day basis. It is just something we have up constantly. It is how we know, if we've got a quick question, we can just pop something in there. It is just, many of us have it on in the background. There is a sound notification. And this is a way that we just know we're working together as a team. It's that sense of co-located. We may be dispersed, but it feels like we're all working in the room together because we all know we're on chat. Prior to the pandemic, you would pop on if you were the one who was monitoring chat for students at that time, but now it is just on permanently. There are days I forget to sign out and I'm like, whoops, left that on all day. And then in terms of emails, we share more in our email newsletters than we did in the past, simply because with people being dispersed everywhere, with the library now in a temporary location on 2 different floors, we just know that we can always say, oh, it was in the June newsletter, it was in the April newsletter, the link to that resource. So it creates this archive because MailChimp archives everything. So I can always resend an email to someone if they missed it. Do you prefer to meet in person or virtually? Well, I like in person, but my toddler only got her first vaccine shot yesterday, so that was virtual. So until she is fully vaccinated, I personally am not comfortable meeting in big crowds until my kiddo has both shots under her. That said, we have one of our librarians, it has hearing issues, and if we are meeting in person, he lip reads. We can't do that with masks right now. So when we're online, we can talk directly to the camera, and it makes, he has on headphones, he can really crank up the volume, and he can lip read at the same time. So a lot of times, it depends on the group you are with. There are accessibility issues you need to be aware of. I didn't mention this, but one of the things about doing multiple channels is that you can accommodate much more for accessibility issues. Because if you're providing visual, audio, and written, you're covering the main 3 ways that people communicate. And it also gets to that sense of safety for people who may have some issues that they don't necessarily want to share with their colleagues. People are not required to tell you, I have trouble learning or hearing or whatever. And this covers it if you have multiple channels. And so those are some things to keep in mind.
Yeah, Megan, I think those are great tips when we think about meeting virtually, even in this platform, it's super easy also to change your background, add an avatar. Best practices, even when I turn off my camera, you can still see what I look like. So things like that can really help a virtual meeting feel more like an in-person meeting and feel more personable as well.
Yeah. And I think some people forget the benefits of virtual are that people can log off if they have something else they need to get to. It's really hard to leave an in-person meeting when that chit chat's still going on. You always feel a little rude when you're like, I gotta go. And it could be as simple as, I haven't eaten yet, or I need to run to the bathroom. In a virtual meeting, it's a little bit easier to say, hey guys, I gotta go. You don't feel so rude leaving a room. There are social pleasantries that do come into things, yes, virtual, yes, online or in person, there are social pleasantries, but sometimes it is a little easier to accommodate for our very busy schedules by meeting virtually. I will say, if you are meeting virtually, make sure you're not scheduling meetings back to back to back, or when you invite people, ask, hey, do you have something right before this so you can build in a 5-minute cushion, because people are going to need to eat. People have pets, people have kids, people are going to need to run to the bathroom. Make sure you're building in what I heard someone call bio breaks, which I thought was a good way to cover all those life issues.
Yep. And that's a good segue, Megan, to the next question from Dr. Brown. Is there anything we can do to help students communicate more effectively online?
Number one, ask them what they like. The interesting thing about being at UDC is we do not have a traditional student population at all. It is all over the place. When people ask, what kind of students we work with, I say we have students everywhere from 17 to 70. And it's the truth. We do. We have that entire broad base. And so the skills and the preferences are all over the place. I had one student who was like, hey, can you DM me? And it's like, okay, I know what you mean. I just need to know what platform. Because to her, saying DM me went, I just need you to send me something on Instagram. Well, I didn't know that. I know what DM means, but was it Instagram? Was it Twitter? Was it Facebook? Like that could be all over the place.
Yeah.
So always ask your students, but also if you are doing this for a class, make it clear that there is going to be one place you always update and then set the expectation that that is what they have to look at. I would recommend that being Blackboard, simply because if you use the announcement feature, it lives in your Blackboard course. Another way to communicate with students more effectively online, link. Yes, do written stuff, but make sure you're linking to videos, you're linking to whatever they need to reference. Students, most of them live online, but do also make it clear to some older students. Reading on the screen, it hurts, like the eyes, they can't do it anymore. So whenever possible, try to make it that something can be printed out. It is easier on people who have, vision issues. I know after a while, I can't stare at a screen anymore. I have to get up and walk. Then also make sure it looks good on this. I gotta go to it looks good on a phone. A lot of students, the phone is their computer. Make sure that whatever you are doing looks good on a teeny tiny iPhone screen. It's simply that's the lives our students lead. That's their internet. That's everything. Their phone is their life. That is where everything happens. And then when it also comes to help to communicating more effectively to students, make sure there's a way for them to engage with you. Leave comments, respond, something like that. But now that I'm rereading, is there anything we can do to help students communicate more effectively online? I think I might have misunderstood the question. Were you asking how you can get them to communicate more effectively with you?
That's a good follow-up. Yeah, I would assume, it's like, how do we, I think, connect with our students? So something that I've noticed as well is with our students, joining remotely, sometimes they're distracted or they're not fully engaged, or maybe they're not communicating with myself or faculty clearly. So how can we help them kind of develop those skills, right, to communicate really effectively?
So this is an interesting one because at the library, we get everything and we are learning as we go. I came from a predominantly white institution. Coming over to an HBCU, it was a completely different student population. And I had to learn how our students like to communicate. It's a different lingo. It's a different vocabulary. I wasn't expecting them to conform to me. I was learning how they communicate because when it comes to communication, that changes with every generation, that changes with every student population, that changes year to year. It's what an emoji meant one day does not mean the same thing the next day. So I have a great resource called urbandictionary.com that when someone drops a word in the chat and I'm like, I don't think that means what it means here, I will go to urbandictionary.com to see what, the current trend is for that word. That's been enlightening. Things like that. There's also asking students how they prefer to communicate with you. Some people, again, going back to the phone, we've had students come up to the desk and they're looking at their phone the entire time. And it's simply because that's a safe space. Coming to a librarian, coming to a professor, that's anxiety inducing. And looking at the phone, that's a safe space. And so they're coming to you for help. They want to maintain this sense of everything's okay. So they're looking at their phone and texting at the same time. More often than not, they're listening. They just, it's just an anxiety thing. The phone is the fidget spinner and things like that. Some students, it is anxiety inducing to come to someone seen as, they're the person in power. They have they can rule my grade. So to improve communication with students, I always say, make it clear that they can come to you with anything, and that it's not necessarily going to impact their grade. I read a fascinating article the other day about a professor who was recounting cheating in the online environment. And what happened was these students invited him to a WeChat group where some students set it up, invited everyone in the class, including the professor. And it started out as just students sharing things back and forth, but then slowly became they all started cheating on a test together. And so it's one of these things where if you set the expectation of, hi, do a WeChat, I'd like to be included so I can share information, but let them know they can talk about their personal lives and you're not going to judge, things like that. It's setting the expectation that you see them as individuals. That can be helpful. They'll be more open to coming with you. But students, they communicate differently than we do, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just learning how to adapt. That's our end of the learning process. How do we adapt to working with students who have grown up communicating in a different way? I hope I answered that. That was all over the place.
No, that was a great answer. And I know we can have a discussion on this forever because it's such an interesting topic. And I wanted to ask you personally, have you ever used VR technologies, things like that for communicating?
So for communicating, no. And part of the reason is I get mild motion sickness. So a VR headset just makes me feel real loopy. But I understand sometimes the importance of creating that third space presence where it's like, okay, we're not together, but we can feel like we're together. I will say the one interesting thing about VR technology is depending on what you use, it doesn't always capture body language. As you've noticed, I'm talking with my hands. I specifically went camera on for this presentation because there's a lot to be said for body language, for gesticulation, facial expressions. Human communication goes beyond just the words and the content. It's how it's described, how it's emoted. And part of that, I did high school theater, so I overly emote on camera simply to compensate for knowing that if my hands are down here, you don't see them. If they're up here, you do. So that's something to keep in mind as well, is VR technology is great if it can capture, expressive body motions and all of that.
It is getting better. Yes. So I will say that even on Zoom, for everyone here, there is an option to turn on an avatar. So I'll use it as an example. I can be a fox right now, and it does capture my mouth movements plus my eyebrows. It doesn't have the hand gestures yet, though. So that's a really good point, Megan. Those nonverbal cues are really key here, right? I see Dr. Charles. You have a question?
First, you got to tell me, how did you just do that?
Okay, I will.
But Megan, thank you for a great presentation. Just great ideas, wonderful things. I want to show my face, but I don't know what I'm looking like right now. And so I am very animated as well. My hands all over the place. But what I have found is the emotion that I've been able to get from students that maybe we did not get in the classroom at times, right? But now they're at home, it's a little more relaxed. And as we're having these really in-depth conversations, there's more emotion, there's more people turning on their cameras, and there may be a tear or two there. Have you found that they're a lot more open to kind of sharing their feelings now that we're not actually in the same space? Or what do you see about that?
So I can only speak to this from the library perspective. When we teach, we kind of, run in, do one class and run away. Like that's what the library is. Unfortunately, if you all want to hire us for more than one class, we're happy to do that. But when it comes to working with students, we tend to get them in two ways. One, they love us, they show up, they know we can help. It's all happy-go-lucky. Two, they come to us incredibly frustrated, anxious, and scared. We don't really see the in-between. In person before the pandemic, I had students in tears. It's just, that's what we see. It is pretty typical for students to be afraid that they've done everything wrong and us to, have to work through the emotions of, no, you're good, it's fine. I've seen tears, I've seen anger, all of that. When it comes to doing this online, we still see that. I would say, because we can do these one-on-one appointments online, we might get a little bit more of they're not holding it in so much because it's not at the reference desk. Yes, we still have the reference desk, but because we're not out in public, they're more willing to be open about, what brought them to that point. Why are they frustrated? Whereas, at the desk, they might just say, I'm really frustrated and upset. I have, X problem. Can you help me with it? Now we get the backstory because It's just one-on-one. There's no one else around to judge or feel like, they're being looked down upon, because some people see coming to a librarian as failing. And that's disappointing. It just means, we as librarians haven't made it okay from the start that, no, we're here to help. Like, we do not judge, like it is one of our ethics.
Right.
But that sense of fear isn't quite so there with the online appointments. So like if we're helping someone in a chat and we're like, okay, this would be better if we were on Zoom, we can say, hey, we're going to pop open a Zoom window. If you're comfortable, camera on, camera off, it's up to you. We always make it clear. It is up to you how you want this appointment, this session to go. You came to us for help. We're here to help you in whatever way that needs to look like. And so, we've gotten a little bit more of the backstory, which can be helpful to help resolve, whatever issue they have. Sometimes it's as simple as their internet sucks. They want a PDF, but it's not downloading. Okay, well, we can send it to you. That we can do. Sometimes it's, I once did a class. My toddler was crawling all over me, or not a class. This student, her toddler was crawling all over her. So we were able to bond, and it helped, shape that interaction, because she's like, I don't quite know what I want to research, but I know I want to do it about parent support in the pandemic. And we got to connect on a personal level. So we both had our kids with us. And so those are always things to keep in mind, is that showing, the dirtiness that is life is fine. I think some people thought when we had to move online that, no, I have to replicate what happened in the classroom, instead of looking at it as, no, this is a whole new ballgame. We can change what academia looks like for the better. And so it is fun when we're in some of these classes to see what some professors have done to adapt to this new format. I've been in some classes where the professor requires the camera on, but only at the beginning, just to be like, okay, it's you and not your kid brother who signed into this class. After that, they don't care. I've seen some classes where they're like, I don't care if you're on, off, whatever, if you're at work, just let me know, put your name in the chat so I can count you for attendance. Like, it's all over the place. I've had some professors who are like, I'm expecting you to answer every question in a poll, just so I know you're still online and haven't fallen asleep because it was a 9 o'clock class. So it is interesting to see how people do this. And so it's always best to adapt to the group in front of you, as opposed to you forcing an entire group to adapt to you. That's what I've found.
Well, I thank you for that, and thank you for your service. Thank you for how you do things. You're doing a really phenomenal job. So thank you again.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you, Dr. Charles. And Helene, I see you have a question as well.
Yeah, kind of a comment. This is about breaking down the silos. And I wonder, I feel like in the past, there have been attempts to create a sort of virtual meeting space where everybody in the university could just kind of chime in anonymously or not anonymously. Do we have one now? I mean, I'm not aware of one, but I know there have been attempts to have one, and wouldn't it be a good idea to just kind of, maybe LRD could create such a space?
So to my knowledge, we don't have anything. I actually did a one-on-one with President Mason. Wow, it was just last week. And one of the things I mentioned to him is the university does not have a centralized knowledge base. And we at the library, that's kind of problematic, because when we're referring people to things, we're like, this was, true, who we're referring you to a year ago. We don't know if that's still the case now. And so one of our recommendations was the university needs a centralized knowledge base, one central location where there's contact information, who does what, updated policies, procedures, all of that. And that would be the perfect way to, build in a chat or, a distribution list or something like that. I do think when it comes to academia, it's not just UDC. I've seen it at other universities, both ones that I've worked at and ones I have colleagues at. The email listservs are locked down. It's a mix of privacy concerns. It's a mix of power concerns. It's just when it comes to email listservs, people don't like things on it. And it's why when someone hits reply all and it gets through, it's a tizzy for everybody. And so this is something where maybe the faculty senate, this is something we bring up. Either, the research and development committee, I don't know where that ends up, but it is definitely something, and if enough faculty clamor for it, that is something to do. I am also a big fan, and I know this is being recorded, but I'm a big fan of just doing it and begging forgiveness later. I tend to fall along the lines of if it's not illegal, doesn't go against existing policies and procedures, why can't I do it? because the worst they can say is, no, you can't do it anymore, and they shut it down. But usually by the time that happens, it's too late and they like it, and we go from there. That's how I tend to operate, but it's always with simple things like, I'm going to start sending out a subscription email newsletter. No one said I couldn't do it. No one's told me to stop yet. So I'm just going to keep going. Things like that.
Well, I mean, I think it could be a very easy thing to do. I'm not sure. Again, somebody has to take responsibility for it.
So
That's the main thing. But just a simple Blackboard organization. Everybody's invited to join it, keeping it open. Here's a discussion board place. Chime in, be anonymous if you want. Just a place for people to, whatever you want to call it, faculty. It shouldn't just be just for faculty, though. Just lounge for everybody. And I don't know whether you'd get people to participate in it. That's always the challenge.
Yeah. Drew has said in the comments, it strikes me that the natural owner of a database for a university is in fact the library. So it could be the equivalent of a knowledge management system owned by the library. Yes. The problem with that, because the library would happily do all of this. The problem is the library would happily do everything. And then what's the point of all the other departments on campus? That's what we run into. We would love to say yes to everything all at once, all the time. It is just the nature of librarians. It is what we want to do. The problem is then we won't do anything well. And these platforms exist somewhere. And so it is always, we have a running list of things we want to get to, but the problem is we need to be able to do things well, and taking on everything is where the difficulty runs into, which is why we tend to push things like in my meeting with President Mason being like, this is something we think should exist. The library might not necessarily be the one for it, it's simply because it's a matter of workload. We have currently 4 full-time librarians. One is on emergency medical leave, so we're down to 3. So this is a difficulty. You can't expect 3 people to run everything. And again, this is a problem of academia. There's so much we want to do. One of the grand things about UDC is every meeting I'm in ends with just this rush of emotions to do all of these wonderful things, not just at the university, but locally, and then nationally, and then internationally. And you kind of got to rein it in. That's the problem, is what is doable right now. So that's why when I was presenting this, it's like, okay, I mentioned, I think it was 6 different forms of internal communications. If you want to start, pick one. Don't do all 6 at the same time, pick one. Do it well, then add another. Once that's going, then add another. It's trying to baby step our ways into improvement, because if we try to rush in and do everything at once, it's just not going to work.
Megan, that's such valuable advice. Since I've been here, I passed my year now, so I've been here for a year. Yay. So it's the same thing for me. I think one of my issues has been, I have all these ideas, so it's like reining it in, what's realistic and also what's within my bandwidth, right? Yeah. So that's really important here. And Pat will show us how to add our avatars. Thank you, Pat.
Sure. Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hello.
Stop screen sharing.
This is so much fun. So let me share my screen here.
Oh,
all right, so to add your avatar, if you look at the bottom of your screen where it says start video, and you click this up arrow, if you choose where it says video filter, it'll take you to this screen over here, right? And then you just select avatar, and now you can go through and select which avatar you would like. Any questions about that?
All right, one more step. Just do that one more time.
Yes, so at the bottom of your screen where it says start video, you will see this up arrow right here.
Yes.
You choose video filter.
Video filter.
Okay. And that will take you to this screen here. You choose, and then you can select avatar. You select avatar right here. If you choose backgrounds and effects.
Oh, look at that.
Choose avatar, and now you can select your different avatars. Oh. You can look like me.
Yeah.
Okay.
I must
Thank you, Pat.
I must have a different version of Zoom because it's not popping up.
Yeah, it depends. If if you have the updated version of Zoom, so just update your Zoom. It could be after this call. Then you should be able to see these avatars there.
Perfect. Thank you.
That said, you can make yourself a unicorn if you haven't updated yet.
That is true. Let me see what I can put on mine. But that's like a fun way. This could be an icebreaker, right? Maybe you can do a virtual background, a video filter.
Absolutely.
I can put happy faces around mine. That could be a great icebreaker tool.
Could do an icebreaker and talk about why you chose the avatar that you chose, right?
Yep. Look at this. We're all having fun now, right?
We're all having fun, and we haven't even done anything besides change our image.
I'm not finding it either, but you said just update the Zoom afterwards?
Yeah, update Zoom, and then you should have that avatar option on there.
Having a good time.
This
is a
is
good time.
cool. I love this.
And I mean, this is another lesson to make online meetings engaging. If you'll notice, there are 10 of us. Everyone who is here wanted to be here. So when you do a meeting, invite only the people who have to be there. A lot of meetings, they invite everyone when you really need 3 people. And so that's another way to make meetings engaging, is only invite who actually needs to be there.
Yeah, and if you might even have a meeting and you realize somebody doesn't need to be there, and you can. That's what Steve Jobs would do. I don't necessarily recommend that, but he was in a lot of meetings where he said, "You don't need to be here. Why don't you leave?"
Drew, you're the first pirate I've ever seen with glasses on.
Oh yeah, that's true.
Yeah, that happened.
Awesome.
Oh, this is cool. I'm gonna try this. Yeah,
cool.
David, you're making me hungry.
I'm hungry now, and I think this is a perfect segue.
I thought it was a little like birthday hat. It's a pizza. Okay.
It's a pizza. It's a pizza slice, right? So that's a perfect segue. I think, Megan, I can't thank you enough. This was a wonderful presentation. We're also having fun now, and I just love it. So I will put some resources in the chat box for everyone here. And I will also send to everyone on this call the deck from Meghan, so you can go ahead and reference that. So Meghan, again, is our outreach and reference librarian with the LRD, and Meghan.Kowalski@udc.edu. She also gave us an example of the LRD June newsletter, so I put the link there as well. If you have any questions for the CAL team, anything that we can do to help, just send us an email to calhelpdesk@udc.edu. We also have our office hours, our PD, YouTube channel, and our survey. So right there. I do want to just highlight, though, our next sessions for this month. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So if you look right here, our next one is Apple Maximize iPhone. That's on June 28th, which is on Tuesday. That will be led by Dr. Moore. So Dr. Moore, if you don't know already, he uses his iPhone for everything. So he will go over how to really maximize and effectively use your iPhone. That should be a great session. So that's at 12:30 on Tuesday. And then next Thursday, we also have, with the whole CAL team, maximizing your use of Outlook. So we'll go over some tips and tricks on how we stay organized, different functions of Outlook that we use. So that will be next Thursday on June 30th. So we hope we can see you there. Megan, any final thoughts before we say goodbye today?
No, but just if you have any follow-up, I am happy to meet with you one-on-one.
Excellent. So it's lunchtime for me. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us today. This was a wonderful presentation. We hope you have a great rest of your week, and we'll see you very soon.
Thank you, David.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye. Great, Megan. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.